state of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
So let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct attention to our common interests and the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures. And we are all mortal.
You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite.
Welcome to Unscripted with Daniel, your free, independent news source for Valparaiso and Indiana politics.
I've been too proud, I've been lonely and heartbroken. I was smothered by love till it made me choke. Been liquored up and stoned down. I was sober as a judge because my stash ran out. But all I know for sure right now.
Okay, today we're going to talk about the AHRC. This is the first episode of Unscripted with Daniel, and this is what we're going to talk about. And I talked to a lot of people on this topic. I've done a bit of research. I've talked to Rob Cotton, council member, and he talked a bit about the history, and we went into like who's politicizing this organization and what's the deal with that? Why would they want to do that? That doesn't make any sense. I thought it was just human rights, right? And then we talked to Emilie and Ellen about Ordinance 8, that legislation that they crafted, and I found out, and they found out that exact day when we did the interview, that it was vetoed. So they talk about what the mayor said, what his reasoning behind that veto is, and then the next day I talked to the mayor himself, and he talks to me personally about what his views on that legislation are, and his personal philosophy on governance and how that affects the way that he's ruling over the AHRC. And today is the day that the council meeting will take place, 8/11/2025, where the council will be able to vote to veto the veto, potentially. So we'll see what happens. It's a developing situation. But yes, so let's go ahead and jump into the interview with Rob Cotton.
Several years of its existence, we were fortunate to have a person who I consider, in some circles, advocate is a bad word, but he was a solid advocate for underrepresented citizens. And that was, I think, the initial chairman was Heath Carter, and so his disposition kind of made it not a big deal that it was operating as an advisory, because he was pretty forthright and public-facing in his disposition, with weekly meetings at a regular time. That was probably the hottest meeting on the docket.
And it felt independent at that point.
Well, it was still an advisory board, and it still had to be checked off by the mayor. But Heath was a very bright man. He would lead marches down to Selma, Alabama. His students would go to Selma. He has an interracial family. He was a hard person to resist with respect to his rhetorical and persuasive wit as it relates to his relationship with the mayor. So, but I'm certain that the mayor had every bit the ability to decline or to reject things that Heath would have brought to him. But there was a pretty good rapport there, and I think a lot of that had everything to do with how Heath Carter was drawn. He was drawn in such a way that these issues are organic to his basic sense of community and things of that sort. And it wasn't such that, I mean, he was kind of a leader in this regard, as opposed to someone who was kind of cultivated or, selected on the basis of a series of interviews, finding common ground about a disposition. His disposition was firmly in the corner of the least among us, or the folks who needed a representative voice. Not to say that the current leadership isn't, but I think he was a little bit more immersed in the entire cultural aspects of what value a human resource council, relations council, means to a city like Valparaiso.
I learned a lot from Rob about the history of the AHRC, especially the Heath Carter. And currently the only reason why he's not on the AHRC is because he found a different position. And that position was at Princeton. So he is off doing bigger and better things. But the point is that, he was instrumental in the leadership of that organization because of his feelings, and people felt like he really wanted to hear those things, not just wanted to, but cared about the issues that people faced within the community, and people showed up for it. It made it a thriving committee. So let's delve a bit further into the history of the AHRC with Rob Cotton here. All right, let's jump in.
Where he says in 2008, after multiple racial incidents in our city, the then mayor created an ad hoc committee. And now this ad hoc committee that this guy is referring to, I also served on. And we held meetings for probably a year and a half. And it was an actively, engaged ad hoc committee. So he further says, this is what the beginning of the Advisory Human Relations Council was. And he, as well as I, had the opportunity to serve on the committee from its inception until 2011, when the City Council voted to codify and formally create the Human Relations Council, or the Advisory Human Relations Council.
Right.
So initially, the idea of a Human Relations Council didn't begin with the mayor. It began with Paul Schreiner and Ivan Bodensteiner, who were both, Ivan's a civil rights attorney, constitutional lawyer, constitutional scholar, and a professor to many of the lawyers who circle all around us today. So highly regarded, highly esteemed, and highly accomplished with several books on the topics, several speaking engagements. I mean, he's an authority on civil rights. But that was the precipitating request by both Mr. Bodensteiner and Paul Schreiner in 2007 or so for the mayor to actually begin a Human Relations Council. As opposed to starting a Human Relations Council, the mayor initiated what we call that ad hoc group. And that ad hoc group had as many people who were dyed-in-the-wool advocates for civil human rights, as well as many people who felt as though that there wasn't perhaps a need for something like this. Not much different than the dialogue we see today, where we want to just kind of forget the past. We want to say that nothing to see back there. We're all equal today, and let's just go forward. We are creating a solution to a problem that doesn't exist anymore. Right. Look, Bob, you're on the city council, but we don't want to teach our children things that are, as they say, woke. And to be quite frank, that term woke is it's kind of a dog whistle, I think, because it began in the Black community, saying it's good to not just simply be around and not understand the dynamics under which many Black communities and Black people continue to find themselves in because of the historical underpinnings that manifest themselves even today. Many people don't want to acknowledge that the underlying history, is still who we are today, meaning in spite of however the laws may have changed and the mobility has increased, we still are largely, impacted and behave in manners that are informed by our bodies deeply within our survival brain, that part of us that says flight or fight. There are still these maybe subconscious, somatic, in our body responses to each other, which means that there's still going to be instances where majorities, and particularly this whole history of white supremacy, is something that I think we are unapologetically unrepentant about anything, and we want to ignore that or actually outlaw it. They call it being woke and killing. You got to kill DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. It's almost like an ad hominem. It's like a bad word, but there was many people who believed that way, as there were people like Mr. Bodensteiner and Mr. Schreiner and myself, who went in dialogue and had a really vigorous and actually enjoyable time for that year and a half or so that we existed as an ad hoc group. In 2011, there had been some attrition in that group, but not the unanimous 100% majority, but a reasonable majority of people from that ad hoc group agreed that it was okay for a couple of leaders. I think I was serving as vice president of that ad hoc group at that point in time, and I think Ivan was chairing it, Ivan Bodensteiner. We were asked, or we decided at that point in time that we'd go and ask the mayor to make it official, to make a Human Relations Council official. And the best we got was an advisory Human Relations Council. I asked Paul Schreiner for a comment in anticipation. I think I did also recommend that you talk to him as well in preparation for the show. But he says that with regard to the gentleman who had written to me, I shared his correspondence. Mm-hmm. I am acquainted, but do not know him well. But his interest is typical of most Americans in his and his understandable lack of insight into the plight of minority life. We don't teach history or culture effectively. And I was speaking to that with respect to actually wanting to reject things that might make our children feel bad about defining and telling us and helping inform who we are, why certain places are perpetually challenged and other places seem to be thriving. It must be something wrong with them. And so if there's something wrong with them, we don't want them around here, and we're reasonable in that assertion. But nevertheless, but returning to the issue, as I stated over the phone with me, he said our national rhetoric that all are equal and all are welcome is not a reality. People of color, of accented English or no English at all, without the trappings of middle-classedness, feel their lack of belonging and are rarely embraced by the decision makers as important unless they have money. So the Indian doctors and the Asians and sometimes the well-to-do Jews, he didn't put Jews, I put them in there because, I think they've actually morphed into being considered honorary whites. And a lot of that has to do with the status and the girth, of their political and economic wealth. But the rest struggle for a zillion reasons, he said. The rest outside of that crew suffer for a zillion reasons. He says also, Project Neighbors and its predecessor, which was called the Valparaiso Lutheran Builders Association, of which my family was, associated with. In fact, that was the small group of folks that had befriended my mother and introduced us to Valparaiso. But in a few relationships that would follow the second generation to transition, I'm not certain what that means, but he says the cultural and financial obstacles to full participation are difficult for old white guys to understand. I don't have a full grasp, but have been fortunate to bump into a few people and experiences which have given me some insight. Guys like Larry Bass understands this, and there are others. But the quickest route to create understanding on the HRC is to appoint people who have lived it. That's what you can do with this legislation. So pack the HRC with folks that have minority life experience or who have not whitewashed their sense of self. Good luck. That was from him. That was sort of as a counter or a rebuttal to what I shared from the other gentleman, who was a very wonderful guy as well. I love that gentleman. I don't want to mention his name, but
saying that it was too woke.
He didn't necessarily say it was too woke. He basically said that that the mayor deserves to have his own advisory commission, being the HRC. And quite frankly, because the mayor's point is that as the executive, his responsibilities are different than the city council's, and that he has to oversee 400 employees, and that it's important for him to be aware of incidents and creative ways to deal with that. And so, but that sounds limited to the population of city employees, as opposed to where this should be focused, not to the exclusion of city employees, but it should be public facing. That's a term that says, the ironic thing is that the mayor wouldn't lose one iota of his ability to be informed or advised by having a structure that is more broadly facing the public. Mm-hmm. And nor would the city council be rebuffed when we make inquiries with the Human Relations Council that they perhaps aren't accountable to answer questions to the city council. It's like, that I think that bothered a few council members, is that we are here by the pleasure of the mayor, and so we'll defer to what conversations we have with him. I don't think that settled well with some people, but my sense of this whole thing is that it was hijacked initially by the mayor, and in a way that would kind of, what would you call it, suppress things, as opposed to allow the truest and most honest, diverse range of dialogue and ideas and creativity from the lived experience that Mr. Schreiner indicated to come forth, So, but anyway.
So in this next clip, I talked to Rob Cotton again, and I asked him about the risk of politicization of the committee of the AHRC, and the Republicans, how they are basically saying that that's what the left wants to do with it. They want to politicize this AHRC and make it all woke and stuff. And that's a problem for them. Now, we're going to jump into Rob's comments on that matter.
Well, you just talked about who's politicizing it, because we aren't. I mean, if a trans person is offended, I mean, there are people walking around talking about all kind of stuff, protestations against that entire community. It is one of those things that that I think certain colleges have been fined because of their being too woke, or because of their DEI programs. And I think the governor has kept trying to kill everything that has anything to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So to say that the Democrats or the left is being political, I think is disingenuous, because what we're trying to do is simply protect the rights and dignities of every single resident, regardless of their persuasion, sexual orientation, any of the circumstances that say that they should not be discriminated against, and that these are the groups that sometimes are. So, or, oftentimes are, I should say, not sometimes, but if there are incidences of discrimination, it's usually against an underrepresented class of folks. So that's not political. That's ethical. That's moral. That's what an HRC does. It's, so if in fact somebody who happens to be gay or trans or something along those lines, is petitioning the HRC for support, for outreach, or for some type of an event, that's one of the things that is in the context of what the HRC does. But because of certain people's political disposition against this, that's where it becomes political. It's not political to reach out or to establish an entity that's designed to have everybody included in the democratic process without discrimination. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. I mean, people always want to equivocate.
Right.
They say, "Oh, they're making it." Well, wait a minute, guys. No, this is not political with me. This is simply about human rights. Human
they're
rights.
just being who they feel they are, and that's the end of it. And so, if they're being discriminated against, they have to tell what's happening to themselves. And the Human Rights Council is supposed to address those issues. It's not political. It's just addressing what's happened to them, and they belong to whatever group, right?
Yeah, but then to blame, to assert that this is a political move on the part of the Democrats is just ridiculous. I think it's an insult too. It's not an insult to the Democrats. It's an insult to whoever's making that assertion, as far as I'm concerned, because it's incredible that the simple Christ-like action of including everybody would be deemed as political, and again, but that is the reverse logic of saying for someone to say that is in fact the gaslighter who is being political, gaslighting the public to say someone else is. So,
I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself, right? There's obviously has to be a place where people can address issues within the community. No matter what group they're part of, no matter how small, every voice counts, as Robert Cotton, his motto says. That's basically his thing, And it's important, obviously, for every voice to at least have a hearing in a place where they feel that they can have their voices heard. If it is the case that they do not feel their voice can be heard in an AHRC, then where are they to go? So if they're so narrowly focused on the goals of some structure of government that is made for minority groups to go to talk about issues of human relations or human rights or things like that, then where are they to go? That is the fundamental question of why do we have it if it's not going to be used for all of those types of cases. There should obviously be a place where we should provide equal services, which is in line with the mayor's philosophy, which we'll get into. But you know what? Let's go ahead and delve into the actual written statement on the page for the AHRC and just sort of analyze what its purpose is. Okay, advising the mayor on the status of human relations in the city and identifying special needs or opportunities to enhance such relations, acting as a resource to the mayor when racially or ethnically motivated incidents occur, suggesting and promoting events designed to promote a better understanding of minorities and improve the human relations of residents of the city, and serving as a liaison between the mayor's office and minority groups. So they went over events, they went over ethnically motivated incidents, they went over a liaison to the mayor's office of minority groups. And there's, particularly when it comes to grants, which I don't know that I have a clip of, but let's go to Ellen and Emilie, and they're going to talk about their discovery that this ordinance that they passed, that by 5-2, was vetoed effectively by the mayor by a non-submittal after a 10-day period. Okay, let's jump in.
I think it's fair to give an update about what's happened.
Oh, before we got here, in the legislative realm, we pass an ordinance. The mayor always has the authority to veto. And so we found out today at 5 p.m. that he has not signed ordinances, so therefore it has been vetoed.
And we should talk about that. We should talk about the power, how important veto power is.
And that we've seen it before this year.
And that we have now seen it twice in this year.
In this type of context?
The mayor also vetoed a resolution we passed regarding SB1.
Can you explain SB1?
Senate Bill 1 is what Governor Braun, how do I say?
I know, I feel like
sold,
you have a couple minutes.
He sold it as a property tax relief bill for seniors that ultimately would give about $300 on average in property tax relief. It wasn't specifically for seniors, but the way that specific part of the bill would impact seniors the most, it will not help renters. But what it also did was create an incredibly short-sighted problem or a short-sighted solution for a long-term problem, because that bill also took away revenue from municipalities. So we are looking as a city at losing about $6 million. I think it varies between 3 and 6. It was 6, then it was 3, maybe it's 4. We do have attorneys working on it right now to tell us exactly what that impact will be before the budget session, so we can account for that. But the council had been raising questions about SB1 since its introduction in January or February. It was met with quite a bit of resistance. Ultimately, Councilmember Cotton drafted and proposed and introduced a resolution that said we need more information. And we are urging our state legislators not to pass this without a clear understanding of its impact. And the mayor vetoed it.
Okay, in this next clip, I talked to Mayor Costas about why he decided to veto this. He goes into the 2 reasons: that there should be no transfer from members of the current AHRC into this new AHRC, or in this case HRC, which in other words means creating a new council. Or a new committee, right? And so the second portion of this is no mayoral appointments, which, I mean, okay, I get the reason why he says that is that in this case they have 3 mayoral appointments that they allowed it to the mayor. But the remaining 6 are for the council. So it's like, okay, so it is imbalanced. It is favoring the council, and in his view, just perpetuates the power, dynamic that they have in the council, and the mayor wants to have control of the AHRC. He wants to retain control of it. Now, anyways, that, it doesn't really, those 2 things together don't honestly make that much sense to me, because if he had no mayoral appointments, he'd essentially just be letting it be theirs, and then basically shutting down his portion of the AHRC. So I don't really understand it. Unless it is, he is only essentially saying, just create a new council. So effectively, these two rules that he's about to go into about what an appropriate change to the Ordinance 8 would be, essentially is just to say you have to make a new committee. Because there's no other way to make sense of the two qualifications that would satisfy him. So we can go ahead and jump into what he says here.
Well, again, reasonable people can differ, and so I can accept and respect their position, but not agree with it. So my job is completely different from the council. They are 7 members that act as a board. So they always need 4 votes to do anything, and that's the nature of a board. We have a strong mayoral form of government in Indiana, and my job is to oversee. I'm the executive, so I oversee the provision of city services with our 400 employees and the day-to-day operations. So it's my job. I have many touch points, and particularly in safety, issues of safety, police, fire, EMS, is where you might, have issues regarding safety, keeping the peace and safety. And so I felt the AHRC that we created was really quite helpful to me because they were a group of diverse people who understood the community and in a broader way than I do, and who could speak into situations as they arose and just help me understand what might be some unique needs in the community, so that we can provide services in a way that helps people the most.
Right.
And people can speak, they speak very frankly to me. Sometimes we agree, we don't, but I appreciate the great people, and I appreciate the fact that they have an ear to the mayor's office, and I have a strong working relationship with Allison Qualkenbush, and we meet regularly, and frankly, it's been very helpful to me, I think, and it's really helped me to provide services in a more effective way. And so the council feels that the Advisory Human Relations Commission should be do other things, and I'm not sure what it is because they haven't yet really been specific about that. And so that's why I disagree. That's the mayor's committee. The mayor has a unique job. Create their own committee. Whatever, they've created an environmental committee, and that's all council appointments. And I have no problem with that. And in this case, they want to take members of my committee and put it on their committee, and they get the vast majority of the appointments. And it really becomes a committee that they control through appointments.
Right.
They have a different view on what that should do. So the point is I guess I ask for 2 things. Don't transfer people on my committee on your committee without even asking them to do this. I mean, just form your own committee. And B, don't give me any appointments on that committee because it's a council-controlled committee. They have a different view on what it should do, and they have every right to do that. But if you give me a few, 3 appointments out of 9 or something, then it really maintains the control and the direction of the council. Okay, and they can advise the council. But I already have a group advisory me that I'm comfortable with, Now, it's a diverse group, but these are people that I've built a relationship with, and, strong, trusting relationships is how things get done. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, so those 2, so at last council meeting, I asked that they would amend it accordingly, and they chose not to, so there's not been much collaboration here. Mm-hmm. And if we need to collaborate to get things done, and so that's why I felt a veto was warranted. And if they get 5 votes on Monday, they'll be able to override that veto. Right. So they need 1 more vote to override the veto. Instead of 4, they'll need 5 votes.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
And they passed it with 5.
They did.
So unless somebody changes their mind, it will probably go this way.
It could. I've asked them all to reconsider, and so sometimes people do, and so I'm hoping they will.
Okay. Well, time will tell this coming Monday. I think it's sort of a hard sell to say that he has not been explained to what they want the committee to be able to do. I mean, in the past, there was a grant program, and there were a few grants that were promised, and so, I mean, those grants never came. Those grants actually were denied after being approved by the AHRC. So it's like, why did they go through the process if he's just gonna not let them do the grants? Okay, so that's basically one of the things, obviously, that they would have be done in the new HRC, and also like being able to address certain issues that would happen, for example, in a school board by maybe a president. Maybe a president said some words. You know what? That reminds me of a clip that I got from Emily and Ellen, and they were talking about what a school board president had said. Let's go ahead and jump in there.
So that happened, and I think at that point we were also dealing with a school board president who was making objectively discriminatory statements against low-income students online. A resident had reached out to the council, the HRC chair, and the mayor asking, what do we do about this? We've got 25 to 30% of our students qualify for free and reduced meals. And we've got a school board president saying they've infiltrated our schools and are bringing drugs, robberies, and murder with them. And the response from the HRC chair was that she viewed those statements as a call for community engagement on a democratic initiative. And in response to, and then also said that she would no longer be discussing the matter with any council members. 4 council members responded, and I think very respectfully and articulately expressed their concern and disagreement, and noted that the voters are looking to us.
Right.
Residents are looking to us, and our children are looking to us. And if we're not standing up and saying that's not okay and that won't be tolerated, certainly not from an official, then who will?
Every school board appointee member did not agree with the statements, and they said that publicly. And the AHRC would not do anything about this event?
Correct. That's correct.
The organization that should be, if any organization, should be doing something about it, some formal statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's important to note, again, that perspective, as much as I disagree with it, is still very important. And that, and that perhaps the entire HRC came to that conclusion. I have to assume that as the chair, she's speaking for the HRC. I have to assume that as the chair, this has been brought to the council and the decision was not to address it. I disagree with the description of it intensely, but that is an important perspective to have. It is incredibly important to surround ourselves with people who disagree with us and who bring different perspectives to the table. And it only reinforced for me the importance of making sure the HRC truly had diverse appointments. And there was no way to do that if only one person is appointing them.
It even, to me, just seems like a logistical issue. Everything is funneling through one guy. It just seems like a lot.
I think that's a really fair thing to say. Ellen and I did meet with the mayor. I had met with the mayor prior to filing the original ordinance, and we had a productive conversation that, as said, ultimately we ended up disagreeing. And it wasn't unfriendly, it wasn't contentious, it was a good conversation. I sent him a very clear, email prior to filing and said, again, I just want to give you the heads up and the respect that you know that I am going to move forward and file this. In those conversations, in that initial conversation, not initial, but that final conversation with him, he did say, I said, I'm worried that we're not talking about our differences. I'm worried that we're not going to continue talking about our differences. And the mayor said, I don't want to keep talking about our differences. And I said, to me, it's very important to talk about those because when you don't, they become very scary.
If we don't, we don't know everyone, right? At a very basic level, we don't know everyone. So, and everyone is different. So I would think
that's where we find our commonality. That's where we find when we look different and we exercise our faith differently and we love differently and we do things differently facially. Those can be really disruptive and scary to people. And when you sit down and you talk to them and you continue talking about them, I think very often you find a common place and find out maybe we're not so different. And I think that exists with politicians too.
Right.
People who might hear the comments and then want to go to that organization and maybe voice what was said and maybe have something done about it. They go there and then nothing is done about it. It just rubs you the wrong way. The one place where they should have their voice be heard, they should have their voice be heard everywhere. But if somebody's gonna listen, it should be the AHRC, or now it's actually the HRC. But we'll talk about that in the end of this, because it has changed. All right, let's jump into what the mayor has said about Beren's comments, how he feels about them.
Well, we live in a great country. Freedom of speech is a beautiful thing, and it must be protected. And it means that we put up with a lot of foolish speech sometimes. And we've all said things that we regret. Sometimes in a heated moment, sometimes in response to a lot of the negativity and that on social media, we lose our cool and we say things. But let those comments stand on their own merits, and you can just respect that person less, or maybe if you have a chance, talk to them about it. But who's going to be the thought police? It's and say, well, you crossed the line, and so we just need to be very careful with that, and just people will say things that you don't agree with. They may say things that they regret the next day when they wake up. I think we've all done that. Give them more grace, and just and then yourself, you set a good example. And if you have the opportunity to talk to that person, but to call everybody out who's in some sort of leadership capacity, it's just, I don't have time to do that. I don't think that's my role as mayor. My role is to make sure that we provide excellent city services in an efficient and cost-effective way, and that we build a city that people want to call home. And we are, I believe, the jewel of Northwest Indiana. And of course, I'm going to be a little bit prejudiced in that, in that regard, but in the sense that it's my hometown, and it's a place that I think is very special. The people, the schools, nonprofits, businesses, just the kindness of our citizens and the talent that they bring. So And that's why people want to live here, you know, and that's why we're growing, and that's and so let's stay focused on those things and set good examples, and hopefully those who have attitudes that need to be changed, they'll come around someday, because they're all works in progress, and some have a little further to go than others. But I think for the most part, it's quite a caring and kind and accepting community.
So basically he said free speech, the AHRC should not have control of people's speech, but it's really not preventing the people from speaking about something. It's just sort of saying, you know, this is probably a thing that we shouldn't say, and it's not like a nice thing to say, and it's like almost like PR for the city. You know, if somebody says something that's stupid, they want to know that the city doesn't really stand for this, then the AHRC can say something about it, even if it's a little thing. It's just like, you know, that doesn't really solve problems, saying something about, making a statement on it, but at least you know that some people in power are, you know, on your side. Okay, I guess doesn't that make sense? I would think it makes sense. Anyways, let's go on into the next portion of this, which is Emilie Hunt and Kapitan going into, I asked them a question, basically. I asked them what people perceived to be the problem with the AHRC, and they're going to go into a discussion there. And then we're going to hear from the mayor and something that he has to say about the future of the AHRC, or the would-be future if he had any say in it.
We have guests.
I'm Ellen Kapitan. I'm the president of Valparaiso City Council.
And Emilie Hunt, vice president.
And I'm just a guy who likes to cover politics locally. I have this first question. What was the perceived problem with the AHRC, in your guys' opinion?
I think that's a really, I think it's a really great question. I think it's one we've heard often, that we've tried to address as best we can, which is I wouldn't say there was a perceived problem with the current AHRC, or anyone on the AHRC, to the extent that Ellen and I now sit on council and have interacted and have had interactions with the HRC. I suppose in that context, there have been what I saw as room for improvement. Meaning, when you're asking the chair of the HRC what you have on schedule, or what's going to happen next, or what are the plans for the HRC, what are you seeing in our community, all of the things they're built to address, and the response is, I'll talk to the mayor about it, or I answer to the mayor. Maybe that's a problem. Maybe that's like a gap that was unintended in the initial creation of this, one that I didn't know existed, if it has existed, but certainly one that made me look at it and say, do we just have appointment? Is having single or unilateral appointments a problem for a board that serves the community, for a council that serves the community and speaks to issues about the diversity in our community, and which I believe is really built, and it states the same in their mission statement, to work for the city, and the best way to accomplish their goals is through the involvement of elected officials.
Emilie, what do you think?
Yeah, it was interesting reading the question on like the perceived problem, and I think that itself almost turned into a problem, or created this space for people to think that we were looking for something that was wrong, when in reality we've spent this time on council. We can see better now how things are working, or as Emilie said, where there's room for improvement. And I think that was really the important thing to do with this ordinance. I'm sure we'll talk about it further later on too, but the climate changed a lot since January 1, 2025 as well. So with the addition of this, new view on what human rights or human relations looks like in our community, or how it's treated in different communities, I think it was really important that we gave it the space to find out where can we improve to ensure that voices are heard, people are represented. Hearing from people of like, oh, I don't know who I can talk to about this, or what can I do, and then they didn't advise to us, so we didn't have anyone that can say, hey, what's going on here? As Emilie said, we were told, oh, well, we report to the mayor. So,
well, and I mean, it eventually, that wasn't the only thing there were conversations with the mayor about the future of the AHRC. There were conversations about the purpose of the AHRC, and if we were going to see it get shut down the way we were seeing it happening nationally and statewide. And, I think through those conversations, the narrative that this was a rushed or targeted ordinance just simply isn't true. We've been on council for a year and a half. This was not introduced until March, after a year and a half of working with the AHRC, or trying to work with the AHRC, working with the mayor, getting that feedback from residents, and then, of course, as Ellen pointed out, watching some of the vulnerability of boards that are unilaterally appointed ending. We always, the first order of business is always to try and find common ground and to meet each other in the middle. And I will say that I know that we put forth a deliberate effort to do that. And at the end of the day, sometimes you're still not going to agree, and that's okay. And it's really important for leaders to understand that and to say, at least we tried, at least we had the conversation. I believe that this specific board is incredibly important. There's endless studies that show how valuable these types of committees and boards are to economic development, education, government. I mean, it perpetuates the success and of thriving communities. So in an effort to protect that, it seemed natural to revisit. And as a legislative body, that's our job, is to quite literally look at policy and make sure that it is up to date and serving our community in the way it should. And this, to me, was a very clear opportunity to strengthen the AHRC and ensure the long-term success of this by including multiple appointments, including appointments from both the mayor and the council, and giving respect to the current board by, of course, having them stay on, or having the opportunity to stay on. It didn't, as we said at the council meeting, occur to me that anybody wouldn't want to stay on the board simply because they were reporting to council or because council appointments were being added.
So basically, they want to make it so that there are a lot of people choosing who are appointed to the AHRC, and thereby increasing the collaboration between the executive and the legislative branches of the Valpo government. And this would cause increased communication between those two, and hopefully more understanding about the diverse community needs of Valparaiso. So next, in this next clip, I talked to Costas and I asked him about a quote that he had said, and what it is he said the AHRC has run its course. What does he mean by that? Let's go ahead and jump into that now.
Well, there's been a lot of sort of going back and forth, on this issue, and the question is how much is this needed? I mean, are we having real issues in the city where people feel threatened? I mean, I think we have some policing and security issues, particularly, with our Jewish congregation. That's one where there's been a sort of clear threat, not so much locally, but nationally. I think we're a community that is pretty welcoming, and we don't have a lot of overt, just
Racism,
yeah,
whatever,
exactly.
all those
Yeah, I mean,
types
it's
of-
kind of like, I think, to some degree, we've come a long way, 20 years, and that's not just me saying that. I mean, that's people that are part of some of these underrepresented groups saying that that it's a pretty copacetic city that just says, we just want to get along, work together well, and celebrate the fact that we celebrate different things, and we can do that and respect one another. So I do believe it's different than it was 20 years ago, and I think maybe that comment was reflecting the fact that we've made a lot of progress, and we've had no complaints, official complaints under our human rights ordinance, and so I think that's something that we can be happy about and realize that I think we've got a pretty pretty good community that knows how to work together and focus on the things we do agree with and be okay with the things that, the differences that we have. That's what community does.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that comment was actually, I think that comment was along those lines, and saying, I think we made some good progress, and I think we have a community that is fairly unified and I think quite welcoming.
So his answer makes it seem that we have, completely overcome racism, completely overcome any type of ism at all in our city. And while I would like to say that we have done that, we have not. I mean, I'm white, and I have seen, racism right in front of my eyes, open anti-Semitism, meaning like when I was doing some protest interviews, somebody from their truck said, I hate to even say, it's the Jews. These types of comments, I can't believe that people are so emboldened to say. He says to those people, they're outliers. But if I'm hearing it, then, there's there's got to be a lot of people experiencing all types of isms all over the city. And, just because time has moved forward since, Voting Rights Act and all these pieces of legislation that have made America be a bit more equal, does not mean that we cannot backslide. And it is so clear to me that that's the case, that people can backslide. When we have the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth tweeting or retweeting that, maybe women shouldn't have the right to vote, and that instead it should be the man of the household who carries those votes and who speaks for the whole house. He is the head of the government right now, and if they actually put in policy that makes that the case, then that cements probably Republican rule for the end of time. And it would perhaps be the end of times if Republicans were the only ones in charge, because what we know is that absolute power corrupts absolutely. All right, so, this is a changing situation. So yesterday was Monday, the Valparaiso City Council meeting, and what happened was The veto was vetoed by the council 5-2, as is required in order to veto a veto of the executive. So, Ordinance 8, as it was written, will go forward. So the improvements that it is to make to the structure of the AHRC is, officially made. Now, what will happen with the HRC going forward, only time will tell. But in my opinion, it is a step in the right direction. And, you can make up your own mind, and I am happy to have those who think differently watching the show and listening on WVLP. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Unscripted with Daniel, and I hope to see you next time. This has been a real long one to put together, but it has been rewarding, so see you next time. Thanks for joining me on Unscripted with Daniel. And if you're watching on WVLP, be sure to tell a friend about this great broadcast. And if you're listening on YouTube, then subscribe and like this video. Thanks so much. See you next time.